Elias Corrin gripped his datapad tightly, though his hands betrayed a faint tremor. The vibration wasn't from the Harmony's steady engines, nor the ship's artificial gravity system, which hummed with its usual precision. No, this was something far more personal. In a matter of minutes, he was to represent humanity in their first real scientific collaboration with a species whose knowledge made Earth's brightest minds look like students scribbling in the margins of the cosmos. The corridors of the Harmony stretched around him, sterile and efficient, glowing with soft panels of ambient light designed to soothe. But nothing could soften the knot in his stomach. 6 months of preparation, endless courses on alien etiquette, and late-night study sessions in comparative cognition had brought him here. And now that the moment was at hand, Elias felt like he'd been thrown into orbit without a tether. The intercom chimed, crisp and neutral. "Officer Corrin," came Commander Saran Valen's steady voice. "Your Zephyrian counterpart has arrived in Laboratory 7. Report for collaboration briefing." His throat tightened. He gave his reflection a quick glance in the polished bulkhead panel. His uniform sat properly across his frame, his hair was passable, but nothing could disguise the flicker of nerves behind his eyes. He forced a breath through his lungs, squared his shoulders, and marched forward. The corridors were alive with purpose. Technicians, aides, and fellow diplomatic staff walked quickly, wearing the same strained look of people who hoped they could trick their bodies into projecting confidence. Even the ship's AI, usually smug in tone, had taken on an overly cheerful air, reminding everyone of Zephyrian greeting customs and conversational protocols. Elias wondered if even the AI was nervous. He reached the door to Laboratory 7. His hand hovered over the entry panel longer than it should have, his pulse drumming. This was it. He pressed his palm to the scanner, and the door sighed open. The room was bathed in a gentle shimmer of holographics. Charts, diagrams, and complex streams of alien script glowed across the air like strands of woven light. And there, standing at the heart of it all, was Salira Vera. Her presence struck Elias with the force of a gravitational wave. Her skin was a deep violet, as though dusk itself had chosen to take human form. Her hair, long, silken, and amethyst-hued, flowed down her back in layered braids that caught the light and scattered it in subtle flashes. Her features were sharp yet serene, with ears that swept upward into elegant points. For a moment, Elias thought she looked less like a scientist and more like something out of myth, an ancient being who had stepped out of starlight. When she spoke, her voice carried a resonance that felt more like a song than mere words. "Officer Elias Corrin. I am Salira Vera of the Zephyrian Scientific Collective. I have anticipated this collaboration with great interest." Elias managed to extend his hand. A handshake, he prayed, was not offensive. The cultural briefings had been maddeningly unclear on gestures of physical contact. For all he knew, this was equivalent to spitting on her boots. But Salira surprised him. She tilted her head, then placed her hand in his with calm curiosity. Her skin was warm, softer than crystal yet faintly luminous, as if starlight pulsed beneath its surface. "The pleasure is mine," Elias replied, relieved. His voice sounded steady. "I've studied your published research on interspecies cognition. Your insights into adaptive problem-solving across evolutionary paths are remarkable." Her eyes widened slightly, an expression Elias guessed was genuine surprise. "You have read my work?" "Most humans I encounter wish to speak only of our technology, our star drives, or our architecture. Rarely does anyone mention theoretical research." Elias smiled despite himself. "I'm not most humans." Her head tilted, her expression unreadable yet intrigued. "Indeed. Your psychological profile suggested unorthodox tendencies. I find that compelling." She moved toward the main console, her movements so fluid they seemed untouched by gravity itself. Every step was measured, deliberate, like a dancer crossing a stage. She activated the holographic array. It blossomed into a three-dimensional maze of data points and glowing threads, dazzling in its complexity. Elias felt his breath hitch. It was beautiful, not in the sterile sense of clean data, but like a sculpture carved from mathematics. "This is incredible," he whispered. "It's like art and science had a child and raised it in the heart of a star." Celira paused, turning to him. "You perceive aesthetic beauty in information structure?" "Doesn't everyone?" he asked before realizing how naive that must sound. Her lips curved faintly, not unkind. "Zephyrians appreciate elegant structures, yes. But we do not describe them with metaphors of reproduction and artistry. Your interpretation is uniquely human." They fell into rhythm as the hours passed. Celira demonstrated precise, systematic approaches to problem sets, while Elias, guided by intuition and instinct, improvised connections she hadn't considered. To his surprise, their methods fit together seamlessly, her rigor anchoring his leaps of thought, his spontaneity sparking her curiosity. For a time, Elias forgot he was a nervous envoy. He felt like a partner. Until it happened. Celira fumbled her datapad. It slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. She bent gracefully to retrieve it, her violet form framed against the silver glow of the lab. Elias's brain betrayed him at once. Years of training, all those courses in cross-cultural sensitivity, shattered into fragments as he muttered, barely above a whisper, words he hadn't meant to speak aloud. "Stars above, that is a perfect view." The air seemed to freeze. His eyes widened in horror as the sound of his own voice reached his ears. His blood went cold. That was it, his career, humanity's first collaboration, maybe the entire alliance, destroyed by his inability to shut his mouth. Celira rose slowly, datapad in hand, her luminous eyes fixed on him. Elias braced for outrage, for cold dismissal, for security to be called. Instead, she smiled. Not a polite diplomatic smile, nor the neutral expression of scientific curiosity. No. This was something deeper, tinged with a slow intrigue. "Perfect?" She echoed softly. "That is a precise evaluation. Tell me, what parameters define this assessment?" Elias opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping on land. I didn't mean, it just slipped out. I should report myself." "Report yourself?" Celira stepped closer, her tone both curious and playful. "For honesty? For acknowledging aesthetic qualities that any researcher might observe?" Elias blinked, dumbstruck. "You're not offended?" "Should I be?" Her gaze held steady. "By your own standards, you have provided unfiltered data. That alone is of great value." She turned back to the holographic interface, though her smile lingered. And as Elias's heart pounded, he realized this collaboration had just become far more complicated than anything the cultural briefings had prepared him for. The next morning, Elias Corrin rehearsed apologies in the mirror of his small quarters until his throat ached. Every scenario ended in disaster. Formal reprimand, early dismissal, maybe even a quiet transfer back to Earth. He had resolved to bury yesterday's humiliating slip under layers of rigid professionalism. He would be the model envoy, all business, no personal distractions. When he entered Laboratory 7, however, all his carefully built defenses began to crumble. Celira Vera stood already immersed in her work, her purple hair bound in an even more intricate braid than before, her violet skin glowing in the lab's sterile light. She looked up, eyes alight, and smiled with effortless warmth. "Good morning, Officer Corrin," she said, as if nothing unusual had happened the day before. "I have been reviewing our preliminary data. Your responses present fascinating opportunities for expanded research." Elias blinked. "Research opportunities?" "I shared your spontaneous observations with colleagues on Zephyria Prime," she explained. "Dr. Kalen Droz, our head of xenobiology, finds your direct methodology intriguing. Elias nearly dropped his kit. You told other people what I said? Salira's smile deepened, tinged with mischief. Only in the context of scientific inquiry. Your unfiltered response provides valuable insight into human attraction mechanisms. Rarely do we encounter such honesty in formal exchanges. Her tone was calm, clinical even, but Elias could see the gleam in her eyes. She was enjoying this, enjoying him. And as the day went on, he realized she had shifted their collaboration into something more experimental. She stretched a little too far when reaching the upper control panels, her posture graceful but entirely unnecessary. She bent to retrieve data crystals that could have been summoned with a flick of her wrist. Every movement carried a subtle elegance, a deliberate invitation for observation. Finally, Elias couldn't help blurting, "Are you running some sort of experiment on me?" Salira straightened, holding a crystal against the light. "Would you object if I were?" "That depends. What kind of experiment are we talking about?" "Behavioral observation," she said lightly, as though describing a simple physics test. "I am documenting human responses to specific visual stimuli. Your reactions are excellent baseline data." "You're studying me like a lab specimen?" "Precisely." She tilted her head, her voice softening. "Though I confess, the results are more engaging than expected." Elias swallowed, unsure whether to feel flattered, horrified, or both. His pulse betrayed him, and Salira glanced at her monitors with a knowing smile. Before he could respond, the laboratory door opened. A tall Zephyrian male entered, his crystalline features sharper than Salira's, his eyes radiating cool authority. His violet skin shimmered under the lab lights, but his bearing was far less welcoming than hers. "Dr. Droz," Salira said, straightening with professional courtesy. "Allow me to introduce Officer Elias Korin, my human research partner." "Elias, this is Dr. Kalen Droz, director of the Xenobiology department." Elias extended his hand. Droz accepted with a grip that felt cold and precise, like shaking hands with authority itself. "Officer Korin," Droz intoned. "I have reviewed Salira's preliminary reports. Your behavioral responses suggest remarkable potential for interspecies compatibility studies." "Compatibility?" Elias asked warily. "Yes," Droz replied, his tone clinical. "Our collective is evaluating the feasibility of long-term human-Zephyrian partnerships. Your unfiltered reactions to Dr. Vera provide promising evidence." Elias felt his chest tighten. "Are you saying my comments are being used to measure whether humans and Zephyrians can date each other?" "Not merely date," Droz corrected. "Physical attraction, emotional resonance, long-term partnership viability. These are critical factors for future exchange programs and possible co-colonization efforts." Salira shifted uneasily, her luminous hair catching the light. "Perhaps we should introduce Officer Korin to these parameters more gradually." "Nonsense," Droz said briskly. "Humans value directness, do they not?" His crystalline gaze bore into Elias. "Officer, will you consent to expanded testing? Systematic exposure to stimuli under controlled conditions, with comprehensive monitoring. Dr. Vera will serve as the primary subject for visual attraction protocols." Elias's mouth went dry. "She'll be the subject?" Salira's cheeks glowed faintly violet. "Entirely professional," she assured him quickly. Yet there was hesitation in her eyes, as though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. Droz continued, undeterred. "Phase 2 will begin with proximity testing, shared meals, recreational interactions, extended collaboration. We must evaluate whether attraction develops into genuine emotional patterns." Elias tried to process this. "You want to study whether Salira and I fall for each other?" "Precisely," Droz said, as if discussing the weather. "The data will inform policy decisions for centuries to come." Salira leaned closer to Elias, her voice low. You are not obligated to agree. If you refuse, they will assign another human participant. The thought of another envoy placed in her orbit, watching her stretch across consoles or smile with that playful gleam, it sparked something sharp inside Elias. And if I agree? He asked cautiously. Then we begin tonight, Droz declared. A private dining facility has been prepared, with appropriate monitoring equipment. Salira's luminous eyes searched Elias's face, holding both curiosity and hope. He exhaled, a mixture of dread and exhilaration threading his veins. All right, he said, almost surprising himself. Let's see what your scientific method discovers. Salira's answering smile was radiant enough to make the consoles hum louder. That evening, the so-called dining facility proved to be more laboratory than restaurant. 17 discrete monitoring devices were embedded among decorative panels. The lighting wasn't designed for ambience but for reading micro-expressions and stress indicators. Elias took one look around and muttered, "Cozy." Dr. Droz values comprehensive data, Salira explained apologetically as she sat across from him. Her attire shimmered in formal Zephyrian fashion, violet silk woven with faint luminescent threads that tested the limits of his composure. I attempted to suggest a more natural environment, but he insisted on controls. Menus appeared, displaying cuisine from both Earth and Zephyrian worlds, each dish annotated with nutritional data and compatibility markers. Elias arched a brow. Should I worry my dinner order will be scored on interspecies attraction? Salira's lips curved. Only if you select the Zephyrian chocolate analog. Preliminary research suggests it increases human receptivity to intimacy. Noted, Elias said with a smirk. I'll save dessert for when I want to skew the results. Despite the sterile environment, their conversation flowed easily. They drifted from technical subjects to personal stories, laughing more than either had expected. Whenever Salira leaned forward, Elias swore half the monitors lit up brighter. And then, halfway through the meal, she spoke with deliberate calm. Your impulsive comment yesterday. I believe it achieved more than any protocol could. You bypassed layers of caution and formality. You revealed something genuine. Elias choked on his drink. We're really going to talk about that? Now? While every sensor is watching? It is a perfect case study, she said, eyes glittering. One spontaneous moment achieved what months of diplomacy rarely manage. Honest connection. Her hand brushed his across the table, whether by accident or deliberate proximity test, he couldn't tell. The monitors flashed urgently. Elias found himself smiling despite the absurdity of it all. So, what's next in your grand experiment? Salira's answer was interrupted by a voice descending from hidden speakers above. Droz's tone was precise and cold. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. Cohabitation simulation, shared living quarters for 48 hours. All interactions will be monitored for compatibility. Salira and Elias locked eyes, the weight of those words hanging between them. For the first time, Elias wasn't sure whether the experiment was theirs to control, or whether it was already controlling them. Elias Corrin stood at the threshold of the quarters assigned to him and Salira, wondering whether he had agreed to the strangest research project in human history, or stumbled into the most reckless decision of his life. The doors parted with a soft hiss, revealing what could only be described as a cross between a luxury suite and a behavioral observation chamber. Every surface gleamed with discrete sensors. The walls pulsed faintly with adaptive lighting designed to shift according to their psychological states. Even the recreational area seemed engineered for analysis, shelves of games and puzzles from 17 planetary cultures, each with known stress-inducing or cooperative properties. Elias muttered, "It's like living inside a velvet-lined fishbowl." Salira entered behind him, her purple hair catching the light, her expression carefully composed but betraying a faint crease of exasperation. Dr. Droz is thorough in his methodology, she said evenly. Yet her tone carried a hint of weariness, as if even she found the extent of the surveillance excessive. The first hours of cohabitation were stiff. They prepared a meal together, moving like dancers trapped in slow rehearsal, each motion deliberate under the awareness of 1,000 hidden eyes. They spoke in measured tones, politely comparing Earth customs with Zephyrian traditions, careful to maintain professional distance. Every laugh, every glance, every brush of hands across the counter felt catalogued, quantified, and stored. By midday, Elias had had enough. "This isn't working," he said suddenly, setting down a dish with a sharp clink. Selira looked up, her amethyst eyes questioning. "The meal?" "No. This." Elias gestured around them, at the walls humming with concealed devices. "This entire laboratory masquerading as a home. We're supposed to be evaluating compatibility, but it feels like a performance review." Selira tilted her head, a gesture Elias had learned marked genuine thought. Zephyrian science values structured conditions. Spontaneity is difficult to measure. "Exactly," Elias replied. He rose from the table, pacing. Sensors whirred faintly as they tracked him. "When I first saw you and made that unfortunate remark, it wasn't because I'd run calculations or weighed cultural variables. It was because you were beautiful and I completely forgot my training." That moment, embarrassing as it was honest. Real. "What we're doing now?" He gestured again at the blinking monitors. "This isn't real. It's data points in search of a soul." Selira remained silent for a moment, then deactivated the game she had been setting up. She approached him, her luminous violet skin glowing faintly. "What do you suggest instead?" Elias stopped pacing, meeting her gaze. "Our own experiment. Not Dr. Droza's protocols. Something human. Something messy. Let's talk without caring what the sensors say. Cook without worrying about efficiency metrics. Just exist together. Like people, not test subjects." Her lips curved slowly, almost shyly. "You propose we ignore the protocols?" "I propose we supplement them," Elias countered, grinning despite the situation. "With what we call the human factor. The acknowledgement that not everything can be graphed or measured. Some things you just feel." Selira considered, then followed him to the lounge. The sensors still glowed softly overhead, but she folded herself gracefully onto the couch beside him. "Very well, Elias. Tell me something about yourself not found in your official record. Something personal. Perhaps even embarrassing." He chuckled nervously. "That's dangerous ground. But fair." He thought for a moment. "I once spent 3 months learning Zephyrian syntax, only to realize I'd been using the word for celestial mathematics every time I meant thank you. The entire embassy staff found it hilarious. I thought I was expressing gratitude. Turns out I was just mumbling about algebra." Selira laughed, a sound like crystalline bells, rich and musical. "That is delightfully human. I admire your persistence, even in error." Her laughter faded into a softer smile. "My turn, then. Something not in my files, I began studying humans not solely from scientific curiosity, but from envy." "Envy?" Elias leaned closer. She nodded slowly. "Zephyrian society values predictability, efficiency, ordered progression. Education, career, relationships, all arranged in logical sequence. Yet humans embrace chaos. You make decisions from emotion, forge bonds that defy probability models, create art that serves no practical purpose. I long to understand that chaos. I long to feel it." Elias felt a pull in his chest, the kind that had nothing to do with science. "So, when I blurted out that ridiculous comment." Her gaze softened. "You demonstrated precisely the kind of raw, unfiltered expression I had always hoped to witness. Not data. Not protocol. You." He reached for her hand, sensors be damned. Then let me be clear this time. It wasn't biology or protocol. It was personal. You are brilliant, unpredictable, and yes, utterly beautiful. That's why I noticed you. That's why I can't stop noticing you. For once, Celira did not analyze. She simply held his gaze, silent but radiant. The air between them felt heavy with something no graph could chart. After a long moment, she whispered, "What if Dr. Droza's data suggests otherwise? That we are not viable?" Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Then his study will be incomplete. Because love, if that's what this becomes, isn't about viability metrics. It's about choosing. Every day. Despite differences, despite logic, despite the odds." The word hung in the air, love, like a forbidden frequency the sensors couldn't translate. Celira's lips parted, her expression unguarded, almost vulnerable. Love, she echoed. A concept without system. Irrational. Beautiful. Perhaps the most dangerous form of chaos. He smiled softly. And maybe the most important. The overhead speakers crackled suddenly. Dr. Droza's voice, cool and clipped, filled the room. Fascinating. Emotional resonance readings have reached unprecedented depth. I believe we are witnessing a breakthrough in human, Zephyrian relational modeling. Elias and Celira both froze, then simultaneously burst into laughter. Celira tilted her head toward the nearest sensor. "Dr. Droz, with respect, your protocols cannot account for the most significant variable." There was a pause before his voice returned. "Which variable?" "Individual choice," she said firmly. "The decision two beings make to care for one another, regardless of your compatibility charts." Elias stood, drawing Celira with him, facing the sensors head-on. "You're asking the wrong question, Doctor. It's not whether our species can be compatible. It's whether two individuals from different worlds can choose to love each other anyway." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the steady hum of the monitors. Celira turned to Elias, her smile luminous. "Then let us choose." And for the first time, Elias felt like the experiment truly belonged to them. Morning aboard the Harmony came with a faint hum through the quarters, a reminder that even simulated domestic life was bound to the rhythms of the ship. Elias Corrin woke to the quiet awareness of being observed, sensors embedded in the walls no doubt recording the angle of his posture, his heartbeat, the micro-expressions on his face. He turned his head, and there was Celira Vera, seated cross-legged on the couch, strands of purple hair falling loose from her braid as she read a projection hovering above her palm. She looked up and smiled, and suddenly the constant surveillance felt insignificant. "Did you sleep?" Elias asked groggily. Celira tilted her head, her violet eyes glimmering. "Enough. Zephyrian rest cycles differ slightly from yours. But I found it comforting, knowing you were nearby." The word settled warmly in his chest. He rose, stretching, ignoring the faint blink of sensors adjusting focus. Comfort is one thing the monitors can't measure. On the contrary, came Dr. Kalen Droza's voice from the overhead speakers, perfectly timed to puncture the intimacy of the moment. "Indicators show increased oxytocin levels and lowered stress patterns when you are in close proximity. Quantifiable evidence of compatibility." Elias groaned. "Do you ever not listen?" Celira stifled a laugh behind her hand. "He does not understand boundaries the way humans do." The day unfolded as though designed to test them. Shared breakfast preparation turned into a small dance of cooperation, Elias nearly slicing his finger while trying to imitate Zephyrian techniques, Celira laughing openly as she corrected his grip. Recreational periods involved holographic puzzles where Elias's wild improvisations often solved problems faster than Celira's careful logic, though the results left patterns so chaotic that she insisted they broke mathematical beauty. By midday, the air felt charged, not with tension but with something unspoken. Every casual brush of hands lingered too long. Every glance seemed weighted with more than data. And all the while, sensors captured it mercilessly. Elias finally set down a holographic game piece and said, "We're not living. We're performing." Celira studied him, then powered down the game. The room dimmed slightly as holographics faded. "What do you propose?" He moved closer, lowering his voice though he knew every syllable was recorded. "That we stop trying to impress the monitors. Let's do something reckless. Let's decide for ourselves." Her smile was small, but her eyes burned bright. Reckless. A human specialty. They sat together on the couch, inches apart, as if daring the equipment to interpret their stillness. Elias took her hand carefully, letting silence stretch. He felt her fingers intertwine with his, the soft glow of her violet skin against his. Droza's voice arrived again, cool and detached. Emotional resonance levels spiking. "Fascinating." Celira turned toward the ceiling. "Doctor, with respect, you are missing the point." "Clarify," Droz demanded. She glanced back at Elias, then spoke with quiet certainty. "You measure hormones and brainwaves, but not choice. We choose this, despite surveillance, despite protocol, despite logic. That is not compatibility. That is something greater." Elias felt a surge of pride at her words. He stood, pulling her gently with him, and faced the nearest sensor. "You're not studying us anymore, Doctor. You're studying shadows. The real experiment is ours. And we're done letting your charts define it." The silence that followed was longer than before, as if Droz himself had no metric for defiance. Finally, his voice returned, oddly subdued. "Unexpected variables. Noted." Celira turned back to Elias, her eyes softer now, stripped of the playfulness she'd worn as armor. "So, Elias Corrin, what do you choose?" His answer came without hesitation. "You. Every time." Her breath caught faintly, and then she leaned in, closing the distance that no cultural manual or scientific study could map. Their lips met, gentle at first, then with a certainty that no data stream could quantify. For the first time since the experiment began, the sensors felt irrelevant, background noise in the face of something far more profound. When they finally pulled apart, Celira's smile was radiant, her voice barely above a whisper. "I believe we have just invalidated the study." Elias laughed, still breathless. "Good. Let Droz write his papers. We'll write our own." They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. The choice had already been made, between order and chaos, protocol and passion, science and something that refused to be named. Outside their quarters, the Harmony continued its mission across the stars, a vessel of diplomacy and data. But within, two beings, one human, one Zephyrian, had begun something that was neither protocol nor experiment. Something Messier. Something real. And for Elias Corrin and Celira Vera, that was more than enough. So there you have it, an unlikely partnership that began with nerves, nearly derailed by a single impulsive comment, only to evolve into something greater than any chart could predict. Elias Corrin and Celira Vera stepped into their experiment as strangers, partners under watchful eyes, test subjects for compatibility. But in the end, they emerged as proof that connection isn't built on perfect data. It's built on choice, vulnerability, and the courage to say yes even when every system insists on caution. For all the brilliance of Zephyrian science, it took a human mistake, a slip of honesty, for them to discover that attraction, intimacy, even love, are not errors to be corrected. They are variables to be embraced. And though Dr. Droz may publish reports full of metrics and graphs, the true breakthrough won't be found in his archives. It will live in the quiet moments between Elias and Celira, their laughter, their defiance, their decision to build something together. Maybe that's the lesson for all of us, no matter how advanced our technology, no matter how precise our predictions, the heart remains uncharted territory. And perhaps it should stay that way. If you enjoyed this story of chaos meeting order, of two souls daring to cross the distance between stars, then stick around. More tales like this one are coming your way. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that even in the vastness of space, connection is possible. Every bit of support helps us bring more stories from the stars straight to you.